Joining us now is radio host Stacy Washington, who also serves as a member of the President's Advisory Board, Black Voices for Trump. So, Stacy, this is a subject matter that conservatives have been talking about ever since 2016. Of course, we've seen other people being brought into it, whether it's Carter Page, Roger Stone, George Papadopoulos. I mean, the list goes on, and the alleged abuses behind it has been something that Republicans have been talking about for a very, very long time. So, do you think that Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham should follow through on his threat to bring in Mueller to testify?
Absolutely. He came in to testify before, and when he did, it was under the guise of the Democrats bringing him in so that they could use him for sound bites, which they then later repetitively parroted over their numerous networks that operate as the PR arm of the DNC. So this time, the Republicans should be ready with their questions, and we know a lot more now than we knew then. And they should ask him those questions under oath. And then anyone who's mentioned, anyone who's implicated should also be brought in to be asked questions under oath. And this time, when they lie, because they will, those people should be brought to justice, because we've seen others in the Trump orbit prosecuted for lying to Congress or lying to FBI members, lying under oath, whether or not they were baited into it or it was a bait and switch or it was a situation where they really didn't know the scope of everything that they were answering. They were used to be prosecuted under the guise of smearing the president. So the opportunity here is not for smearing, not for being dishonest, but for actually getting to the bottom of this and holding these people accountable. But because without that, we no longer have the rule of law. The one thing about America that makes us so unique from other countries, besides the peaceful transfer of power every 4 years in the presidency, is the fact that in America, every person is equal under the law. We don't have a separate tier of laws for people who are rich and a separate tier for people who are poor and politically connected. It's supposed to be that all of us should fear lying under oath, lying to Congress, or lying, period, when we're placed under oath. And we are losing that. So in order to preserve it, we need to have these people brought in, have them answer, and then have the appropriate repercussions ensue afterwards.
And that's what a lot of conservatives are saying, too, when they highlight this idea of a two-tier justice system. They'll say that Clapper, McCabe are on video giving contradictory answers while under oath and no action taken against them. But then you have these, for example, in the case of Michael Flynn, I'll use as an example, of James Comey sending FBI agents over to the White House to question him. The legality of that within itself is very suspicious, because Michael Flynn may have thought that they were coming there as employees under his executive branch authority. So there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to a lot of the pursuit of charges against these Republican figures. But then when it comes to these Democratic figures, or at least people who are looked at as critics of the president, there's no action ever taken, although their contradictory statements are on video. So a lot of people are hoping that the Durham investigation answers a lot of questions about the origins of the Russia investigation. But we've also heard that he may not get his report out until after the election. Would that be detrimental?
I think it would. One of the things that's interesting to me is that you can go on the internet and find credible sources that have been cataloging the lies of Brennan and, just Clapper, all of them. You can find these sources online. Now, obviously, you can't use an online source to prosecute someone, right? You need real evidence brought to you by investigators. But the fact that the evidence and proof of their lying, it's really just video clips where they said one thing in Congress and said another thing on CNN. So, one of the things is not true. So if that's so readily available for us to peruse and understand that something is wrong, then the investigation should be, in my opinion, much further along so that we don't have to wait until after the election. We don't need an October surprise. We need judicial prudence. We need actual investigations to yield results that give us either an innocent or a prosecution. So there's not enough evidence to prosecute, or there's enough to prosecute, and then a jury of their peers would bring them to justice. And that's all the American people are looking for. And it has to be that Democrats are held responsible for lying. It can't just be Republicans who are brought up on charges and eventually, have their livelihood stripped from them. It has to be, if you're a Democrat and you lie, if you're a FBI agent and you bring a dossier in and use it to unmask Americans, there has to be some repercussion for all of that. So I'm looking forward to it. And I pray to God that it's not something that has to wait until after the election, because we're already in for a doozy with, Joe Biden and his mental decline and the attorneys that they apparently are planning on contesting every election in every state and dragging out the result if he loses. We have a lot of things on the line here. And I am most interested in seeing justice because I'm an American, as a veteran, as a mom, as a wife, whatever you're calling it. We deserve to see justice had right here in this situation with this investigation.
All excellent points. And I think it's a little bit problematic, too, for example, if John Durham were to hold off until his report until after the election, because you could argue that Joe Biden is a subject of that investigation to some degree. He's the individual who, as of now, is the first one to bring up the concept of the Logan Act being used against Michael Flynn. And then, of course, if we get to after the election, I mean, there's no reason to suggest that that investigation will be suppressed, if not halted altogether. So if that's the case, I also expect Republicans to launch some of the similar obstruction of justice allegations that many people thought that President Trump was going to do to Robert Mueller, but never really came to fruition. So I think there's a lot to keep an eye on this subject that's very nuanced, too. It's not something at the forefront of a lot of American voters, but nonetheless, as you point out, it's very important for the concept of law and order. Stacy Washington, I appreciate you coming on, breaking down these investigations for us. Thank you.